Good morning and welcome to the Last Forgotten Fish Room live stream. Feel free to sign in the chat, and holler, and conversatify and whatnot. I'm going to try to... So there he is. That guy has this weird looking nebulous little Hokioku type pattern in both of his second stripes. And when did I first point that out? About a year ago on the channel. And he hasn't played them. And it's like when true Perculas, I haven't raised my sellers before, but when true Perculas get their stripes, you'll see like the black outlines start and then the white fills in. And sometimes they'll get one white spot before they get another little area. And it'll look kind of like this guy does just for a little while. But this guy's looked like this for a year now. And those stripes have not changed. So as far as I know, that's a one-of-a-kind fish. Anyway, enjoy so you can get a good look at him. Sorry about all the bubbles. Nothing I can do. Maybe he'll turn sideways a little better. Maybe he'll move so I can move the camera again. Put it back where it's more visible. So, can you see how his stripe isn't quite there? And I got like black going through it. That really is a good fish right there. This is not exactly a spacious work area. Put this in the top off there. Try not to spill it on the left. Oh, how about this guy? Tracy's driving and listening, which is my hint to put on some music for her.
It seems a waste. You can't help but to compare because you still long for the days of what once made you happy before she locked the gate. You can't help but to compare because you still long for the days. You won't get what you want, you get what you get. You can't save the dead, oh, wake the damn. It's
Oh, look at me talking with the microphone on mute. Sorry about that. Now I gotta try to recap. Okay, so okay. Hi, Maximo. And I have unmuted the microphone. Now there is sound. I remembered this time. You know, it's generally only once per broadcast. Yeah. What's going on with that? I have no idea. But that's special. Oh yeah, the little shark fin there. Yeah, I love that. My daughter's in there laughing at me. So anyway, let me scroll this down for you. So I was talking about this lightning guy, nebula. I really don't know what to call him. He's just a random variation. He's looked like that for over a year. A lot of times when you get Percula showing their stripes, it'll be, you know, like a spot will come in, white with a black outline. And then coming from that, there will be another black outline where the white will fill in. This looks similar to that, only the stripe grew in, and some of it just became black squiggly outline across the middle of it. So instead of looking like a lightning maroon, it looks kind of like a couple of lightning bolts down both sides of this clownfish. And it's really cool. But that is the offspring of Bubbles and Zoom, the true perculas who I've had for quite some time now. I changed the mirror setting on the camera so I can actually gesture properly now. Speaking of Bubbles and Zoom, I'm going to go ahead and feed them again. Because anytime she's looking like she wants food, I feed her. You don't always go after it. Oh. Okay, apparently they've had enough there. I ate for today. She wants some mysis or some rod's eggs. So, anyway. I was explaining that the eggs from yesterday, I reviewed the tape. First of all, they didn't really look good to begin with. When I was inspecting the eggs before I pulled the pot, none of them really looked like they had very good yolk sacs, which is pretty key in determining whether or not your fry is going to survive. But in addition to that, it being the second time they've spawned in a pod, and half the eggs looked ready, and half of them looked 2 days from being ready. You know, some of them looked copper-eyed, some of them just had silver eyes, but half of them still had brown eyes, and that's just not even close to being ready to hatch them. So, after reviewing the tape yesterday, it seemed as though I had too much RG complete in the water, and the water level had risen to the point where the air current had been reduced on the eggs, and the eggs had spoiled. Once the eggs spoiled, it polluted the water in there, and that's what killed all the fry. So, I'm either going to have to wait and pull the last half of a batch and maybe try to manually harvest with a siphon hose, or it just seems too messy to pull the pot, let some hatch, and then put the pot back in the tank for them to tend to, and then pull it again, and then put it back, like. So I either gotta let some of the first hatchers go, or I just gotta wait until the eggs get better before bothering to harvest again. I pulled sample culture from the water. Food really wasn't an issue. If anything, I was overfeeding them again. I think the past couple of times it's been the eggs going bad, killing the fry. So, I guess I'm in for a new learning curve since I've completely changed my my method here. All these babies that I have are eggs that were laid on the live rock in the reef tank, and basically harvested from the tank with my secret harvesting concoction. Yeah, I do have plans to replicate that method on an industrial scale, if necessary. And the reason why I developed that method was because it would assist in harvesting more difficult and delicate species. So, adjuster. I'll be set. Anyway, let me set this up and give you guys a better view of the reef tank. After I almost knocked that down. You gotta make sure to have a near catastrophe whenever performing any of my thing tasks. That was a mess. A little mousey. Oh, isn't it cute? I don't even have to feed it. Sean said that there'd be Sean forgot that it was mirrored. So here. Just gotta remember that it's the right way instead of the wrong way. Let's see here. Little lightning baby. Hey little guy, what you doing? Hey you. Oh, your stripes are kind of getting different. Let's see here if I can get this thing to take a still photo. Where'd he go? Shit. No. Oh well. I guess I scared him. There's Ganju. And more Picassos. Wow. Who nicked your gill, Ganju? Oh no, that wasn't Ganju, that was the gill nick guy. Okay. I knew I had one guy with a nick gill. That's why I pulled him out of there. Hi, babies. Oh, look at you. Oh, look at you. Hi. Hey, little babies. Y'all aren't hungry, are you? You think I'm gonna feed you? You think I'm gonna feed you? Tatsuki. Kenny, where's Tatsuki? Oh, Kenny don't know what that is. She's like, what the hell is that? Tatsuki. I had eggs under there, doesn't she? Tatsuki's been hanging out underneath this thing. Alright. Let's see here. Get them some food with one hand while I hold the webcam. How's this gonna work? Ah, See, being a Sasquatch comes in handy sometimes. I can also open a soda. Where's this little guy? I'll reach way back there. Get those guys some food. Get your food. I don't think they're as hungry. Not quite as hungry. Kenny, want some food? Okay, that just seems unnecessarily risky. I'm gonna try to put that right there. Nope, no good. I really like this guy. That is a good looking fish right there. He's cool. That's Snowflake. That's the most Picasso-y of the Picassos. Pretty original. There's Totsky. Hi, Totsky. Totsky. Totsky, it's okay, baby. What's the matter? Hi, pretty baby. What do we do about this stagnant water y'all got in there? How about that? Oh, and that's improved the air pressure in there. That's good. There, yes, there. So if this was pointed the right way, then I would point it the right way. There we go. Hello, Marina. Some of these fish do not like this webcam. Although I'm kind of enjoying it. I don't know. I like the ability to have one camera going and use this one. Hi, Orihime.
pulsating zinnias. Ooh. That right there is not star polyps. That is organ pipe coral. Really wish I could get a better shot of that rainbow money. Oh, my back. Oh, fuck. Okay. Anybody hear that popping sound? Holy crap. There's the mint chocolate chip or whatever. Looks like ice cream to me. I don't know. And that guy is growing more polyps. It's cool. Too bad none of these guys can ever be seen. Well, sorry for that, snail. I love you, snail. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. Hey, look, fish. Alright, so let's train it for far away focus. No, far away. Far away? Too far away. Yeah, there we go. Come on, love. There we go. Get some food, dummies. see this thing.
Oh, the rest of you.
Oh, that was that tank right there. 4 babies in the back and 4 babies in the front, I think. I should have a count written down somewhere. Well, what a horrible angle. Lacey says she wishes her home was a chocolate chip ice cream.
facing. There's no patronage for patrons, but my patience tells no lies. Profit thing of evil, profit still, if not my lover. So you ran and you took cover from the concerns of your life. And all I want is for you to see what you want is supposed to be. And all I need is for you to pray, for the way is the truth and the life is the way. You won't find another way. Take it back. I don't care what you say, take my mind and my heart. You throw it all away. Take your lies, take your hate, and get the fuck away. Push me once, don't look back, just lie back and fade away. You'll come back again. You won't repeat your sin, but you're not welcome anymore. Take it back, all those plastic dreams and lies you can't sustain. Take it back, what you'll really do is never what you say. Take back all your promises and throw the truth away. Push me once, don't look back, just lie back and fade away. Now you've got me by your talents and the love that you were meant. When your words were only spoken to be broken, you were scripted. You meant what you had promised, you go fast and show me proof. But instead you ran away, I guess you never liked the truth. Take the knife of all your virtues out, what's left pure in my heart. Your intentions failed to mention that the
Okay. Hold on just a second here. This is kind of hilarious. So this, let me make sure it's being seen here. This is my little Acura prototype Honda Accord Le Mans prototype race car thing. And one of the distinct features of it is this front splitter right here. So you've got a front splitter right in front of the windshield, kind of. Although I actually made this car to be front-wheel drive prototype. Okay. Check it out. And I designed every last little bit of it around this whole front splitter concept. Okay. So, and there's me trying to get the cheapest plan for my wood ramps outside. All right. So, front splitter, new Acura prototype. Not in the same place, but front splitter. Like a front wing, you know, not like the usual splitter that's down on the ground. It's a wing on the hood. A wing on the hood. See? Wing on the hood. And yes, I sent them the design. Why wouldn't I? Hey, it's okay, it's okay. You're welcome. And I'm gonna need that boat. Okay, alright, are we back in Reef City here? So I thought that was pretty interesting. You know, not that people don't jock my style all the time. Okay, so anyways. If you haven't seen it already, please check out the Moana tattoo video. Because that's... you're having a little trouble figuring out who I am. Just remember, the word demigod doesn't mean half-breed. It means diminished. In whatever manner. Including self-diminished. Like this. Maybe that's not quite what you have.
One state, New Hampshire, it's a poll just out this morning, given exclusively to Morning Joe, and it shows soft numbers for the president among Republicans there. John Kasich finished a distant second to the president in the state's primary.
I'm having to turn my volume up to 97% to barely hear this video.
Same question showed Kasich up 14 points on the vice president, though more than 30% were undecided on that matchup. Of course, it probably doesn't help your case when you refer to the state as a drug-infested den, which the president did in the private phone conversation last week, or apparently at some point in the last 4 or 5 months with the president of Mexico, Joe.
Yeah, that's speaking of people living in New Hampshire in places that are drug-infested dens. Let's bring up Dartmouth grad Sam Stein. Sam, I kid, of course, Sam. I'm just joking, Sam's mom. I'm just joking. Sam,
Yes,
you know,
Joe.
these are the kind of polls that we see, like year 3 into a presidency, right? Or that's like they'll pick the strongest Democrat to run against Clinton, or they'll pick the strongest Republican to run against. I mean, here we are,
Sure,
6
yeah.
months in. Here we are 6 months in, and you're already seeing John Kasich trouncing the sitting incumbent Republican president in the primary. And you're seeing it. You're seeing Trump's numbers go down, the president's numbers go down also. And I just wonder if it's, at the end of the day, the fact they just haven't succeeded in doing anything. Nothing succeeds like success, and they just haven't passed any legislation.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely part of it. I think ridiculing the state for its opioid crisis doesn't endear you too much to that state, I would argue. Mike mentioned healthcare. If you look through these issue numbers in the CNN poll, healthcare just stands out. The numbers for his handling on healthcare, 31% approve, 62% disapprove. That's an anchor around his neck, and I think it's an anchor around the Republican Party's neck. And it's tough to figure out if they benefit by going forward with the Republican authored bill, or if they benefit by just letting it drift off the radar entirely. But I keep coming back to this one thing, which is that we're discussing these horrible numbers for Donald Trump. We're theorizing about hypothetical matchups with John Kasich in New Hampshire. And all of this is being done despite this White House not facing a crisis of its own making. Everything that they've dealt with has been self-inflicted. And most presidencies don't go that long without an external crisis that they have to manage. I mean, I think back to this time in the Obama administration, it was the Tea Party protests, and then the next summer was the BP oil spill. You had things like Ebola, for instance, and each summer there was another crisis, and each crisis affected the president's approval ratings. Trump hasn't had that yet, and we're still talking about his numbers at this point.
Still talking about those low numbers. Kristen, let's talk about polling. Because healthcare, again, healthcare was the third rail for Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton in 1993. It was the third rail, of course, for Barack Obama from 2010 and the Democrats forward. But one of my favorite polling numbers from, I think it was 2009, 2010, was of just self-described Tea Partiers. And the Tea Partiers, something like, 60% were shocked and stunned and deeply saddened that the government was going to get involved in their health care. 74% said, do not touch my Medicaid. Or Medicare. Like they hated health care involvement by the government until it impacted them. And I just wonder with these GOP, whether the Republican Party is really, and you look at these numbers, it looks like they are, whether they're really misplaying health care, trying to shove through a bill that has a 14% approval rating, and a bill that, as we have said from day one, will negatively impact a lot of Trump voters.
When it comes to healthcare, it's one of those issues that reminds me that voters, for the most part, are not first and foremost ideologues. That a lot of these debates we have about big versus little government, that these are the sorts of things that for a voter, what they care about most is my healthcare getting more expensive or less expensive? Can I go to my doctor or not? And so you had a lot of Republicans that opposed Obamacare on ideological grounds, but you also had it as a political anchor for the Democrats for quite a while, because there were a number of people that said, wait, you said I could keep my doctor and I can't. You said my health care was going to get less expensive, but it got more expensive. The problem for Republicans is they've now tried to sell their plan in largely ideological terms. And so even as the message gets out there that on things like keeping your doctor, keeping your health care, keeping your coverage, what will the cost look like, that message has been that will get worse. And the response has been, well, but we need to get rid of government control in healthcare. We need to get the government out from between you and your doctor. I think for most people, they're not looking at it ideologically. With that ideology,
the dumbest thing the American people have done is vote Republicans in to fix the Affordable Care Act. Republicans were the ones who were making it fail to begin with. These people are former employees, former CEOs, former lobbyists of the very insurance companies which they are effectively lobbying for while they complain about Obamacare. Meanwhile, it's the insurance companies who have those Republicans in their pockets who have been sabotaging
That's it, sabotaging the implementation of the Affordable Care Act with the help of Russian hackers. The rollout problem? Yeah, Russia. But if we would have all voted Democrats in, understanding that simple, basic fact, which I think most people do, is that the Republicans basically work for the insurance companies, and the insurance companies and Republican governors who fucking work for the insurance companies, not for the people, are the ones who made the Affordable Care Act, which was a well-intended, well-crafted bill that lacked enforcement. If they would have voted Democrats in, the Democrats would have been able to amend the Affordable Care Act providing enforcement. Basically, tell the insurance company, if you don't want to do business in all 50 states, you can't do business in any state. Period. That way you have a couple companies might drop out of the American market that aren't American companies. But what are American insurance companies gonna do? It might cost a bit for them to adapt to such a structure, but it would have prevented this from happening. They raised rates as if that happened anyways, just to fuck people. But we still had 20 million more people get insurance. And if we would have enforced the methodology by which costs were evenly distributed instead of later made back by overcharging people with good insurance plans, we would have had, like, we'd have everybody else insured. Everybody's rates would be going down by now. Actually, they would have started going down 3 years ago. But no. We had Russian hacking, Russian propaganda machines working in this country with the Republicans, who also worked for the insurance company, but were more than willing to take Russia to hell, not seeing that they were being tempted into stabbing their own country in the back. They went lusting after the whore of Babylon. Plain and simple.
Messaging, you're not going to have as much support. Now, the worst case scenario for Republicans is that they don't pass anything that touches Obamacare, and yet they still get the political anchor around their necks. They still go to town halls and get yelled at about it. Then they wind up with taking the political hit, but not actually getting the policy in the end. That is the worst case scenario, and I fear that that's what we're starting to look at as a
worst case scenario. 500 people every week talk about this shit, and nobody tells you the truth about it.
Party.
That is what the party's starting to look at, and you're exactly right. People don't look at healthcare ideologically, as far as most voters go. I mean, Obamacare, a lot of things in it I didn't like, didn't support its passage. At the same time, you can't, if you're
Joe. Sure doesn't understand how a Texan thinks, that's for sure.
coming. Despite a deal by major producers to cut supply, OPEC exports hit a 2017 high of over 26 million barrels per day last month.
The overall outcome that they planned for was for higher prices. When those prices are higher, then you've got countries whose balance sheet depends on oil. They're going to inevitably cash in.
The current agreement, which runs until March 2018, wants to cut 1.8 million barrels per day off market. OPEC and non-OPEC members are meeting in Abu Dhabi to discuss why certain countries aren't meeting their targets. High on the agenda will be criticism by some producers about the data used to track compliance. The so-called secondary sources measure relies on a mix of government agencies, media, and industry bodies.
There is always going to be a degree of, I would say, reverse engineering backwards, because these sources are coming from media agencies who are discussing with
Nikki Haley defending the president on trust, as these new CNN poll numbers show he is facing, and this White House is facing, a credibility crisis. 60% of Americans don't think the president is honest and trustworthy. 24% say, only 24% say they trust what is coming from the White House. That is compared to 73% who do not. Let's bring back in our panel. Alex, to you, looking at North Korea and the situation, you have North Korea coming out this morning threatening physical action. That's the regime's words in response to these sanctions. Given the crisis and given the tense situation with North Korea right now, and you've got an American public who largely doesn't trust this White House.
It is the nightmare for folks who have been in the White House before, or who have tried to nudge this White House in what they see as a more constructive direction when it comes to public communications and credibility. What if this president had to go to the American people and make the case for military action somewhere? You already have people after the whole Iraq war experience extremely skeptical of what they hear from the government about the need for using force.
I mean, look, this president has that is what he has based his questions of the intelligence community on.
Absolutely. And so you combine that with a president who has an individual credibility crisis, and suddenly people start to worry, people in the sort of national security establishment, the Washington establishment in general, start to worry, does this president have the leadership position to make the case for the country to do something really difficult and scary?
So then the question becomes, Betsy, to you, what does the White House, what does the party do to turn this around?
It becomes extraordinarily difficult. The reaction that he celebrated with him on the Rose Garden several months ago was actually mean. It's not just an issue of the American people not trusting the White House. It's also an issue of Congress, of members of the president's own party not trusting him to follow through on commitments that he makes to them. That speaks to the ability of the Republican Party to actually advance its agenda now in a rare moment of united government. And of course, if the Republican Party can't deliver on promises that it's been making for nearly a decade, namely the promise to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, that will do nothing to help the president and his party gain the trust of American voters. So they're kind of between a rock and a hard place on this one.
You know, Tara, Kellyanne Conway, one of the chief counselors of the president, admitted as much that we've got some poll issues. I mean, she's a professional pollster. This was her bread and butter before she came to the White House. And she said, we got to get those numbers up with Republicans. Now, the president said all those polls are fake, but the people around him say, we got to deal with this.
Right. I think it's a bit of a reality check that maybe the president isn't comfortable with admitting, but perhaps his aides are more comfortable with that. But at the end of the day, they're right. They do have to get those poll numbers up, but the question is, how can they do it? Maybe tax cuts, if the economy is doing really well around 2020, that could be really helpful for him. People don't generally like change, and if things are doing well, then Trump could sail into a second term. But, between now and then, they do need to be thinking about how much value the words that are coming out of their White House have. This is a struggle that any White House has, even White Houses that have a real, devotion to the truth in a lot more ways. And this is something that they need to really work on if Trump is going to make it into a second term. And obviously the economy will help, tax cuts will be great, but we'll see if that's even what comes out of tax reform, if they can push it through.
Alex Burns, front page of your newspaper, above the fold today is this report by your colleague talking about this climate change report from scientists from 13 different federal agencies coming out. I think this is draft version 5 that they've been working on, basically saying the climate, temperature has been accelerating at a rapid pace in terms of climate change over the last 4 decades, and human contributed emissions, CO2, are largely to blame for that. Now, that runs directly counter to what this president has said, and namely what the EPA chief, Scott Pruitt, has said. How does that factor in with this trust gap and this credibility gap?
It's one of these issues. Climate change is one of the issues that is not necessarily seen every day as a crisis for this administration, but it goes to, as you say, the heart of, I think, the credibility battle, and really the battle by this president to sort of impose his view of the world on a resistant federal government. That when you have all these scientists reaching this conclusion that has been resisted by political appointees, and their conclusions happen to make it into the media while it is still pending.
I think they were concerned about it not getting out there. They were concerned that the White House wouldn't sign off, Lisa said, the reporter, on this report. She's going to join us next hour. And if the White House doesn't sign off on it later next week, it wouldn't be public.
Right. And there's a conventional wisdom in Washington and the political world that, climate change is often not a voting issue the way a lot of other issues are. But, when you ask people about the importance of scientific information, do you want leadership that trusts data, that trusts science? The polls you get back are pretty lopsided. And so, I don't know that people are dying to see the president suddenly reverse everything he's done on climate and the environment. But the more this sense builds that the administration is suppressing or can't be trusted with hard information from experts, that certainly feeds the larger questions of credibility.
Betsy, what do you think? I mean, there's a reason that this report was leaked, right? There's a reason that this got out there and landed on the front page of the New York Times today.
Right. That itself also speaks to the trust problem the president has with employees of the federal government and with folks in the scientific community. It's something we've seen across federal agencies as more and more federal employees feel comfortable or feel like they have to leak information that otherwise wouldn't necessarily be released. Now, of course, the leak of this report is not an illegal leak. It's not something that would fall into the purview of the Justice Department to investigate. That's important for people to understand. But it absolutely gets to this larger problem for the White House, which is the people advising him, the people in agencies gathering research, gathering information, don't think that he trusts them. And the result is that they feel more comfortable and they feel an obligation in some cases to release information like this that can really damage the White House. And one thing in this report, one really important nugget that's highlighted in the New York Times story is that the report shows there have been major advances made in what's called attribution science, which is the way that scientists can connect human behavior to the changing climate. That's something that's going to be a major problem for the president, and that's something that's a really important scientific advancement because it helps us make sense of what's happening. That's going to put the president, put Republicans on their heels, as they may have to change their approach to this issue.
All right. Thank you so much, Betsy, Tara, Alex. We appreciate it. A lot to get into in these numbers. Coming up, a new political analysis predicts, despite low approval numbers for this White House, an uphill battle for some Democrats in 2018. What the map says about the party's chances of retaking the House, plus UN Ambassador Nikki Haley refusing to discuss a report containing classified information on North Korea. So why was the president retweeting that article with anonymous sources, those sources he hates so much? And the intelligence community is reacting next.
A new CNN national poll really gets to the heart of the Trump administration's credibility crisis. 1 in 4, not even, say they trust most of what they hear from the White House. 36% say the president is honest and trustworthy. How big a deal? What do you do about it? Let's debate. We have CNN political commentator Anna Navarro and Matt Schlapp chairman of the American Conservative Union. Matt, what do you do about this? Nobody likes to see these types of numbers, Chris, but I think it's important. We're at a point in politics where, yeah, I didn't get a copy of this poll, so I haven't read it thoroughly. But if you look at the numbers of Congress, they're abysmal. If you look at the fact that we just had 6 Republican senators switch their vote on Obamacare approval, there's great concern out there amongst Democrats and Republicans. You have a lot of Democrats who are looking at this strategy of hashtag resistance, and they know that's not a good strategy. But if you're the president and you're looking at these numbers, you know that
it's not a strategy, bitch. It's a movement.
You've got to steady the ship on these messages that come out of the White House, and you have to make sure that you're pushing back on false stories about what their agenda is. And number one, you've got to get accomplishments through Congress. You got to repeal Obamacare, and you got to get a big tax package done. So how does the president lift his own credibility by attacking the others, the credibility of others, Anna?
This has been The Truth by Donald Trump. Dems face uphill climb going into election. That just sounds annoying. Oh, it's funny how none of these videos show up on my subscription list.
Congresswoman, you represent the district. Your response.
Well, my good friend, and he is a good friend, Alan Dershowitz, has managed to insult both the special counsel, Mr. Mueller, and jurors and grand jurors in the District of Columbia. So let's be clear first. You can't bring a grand jury anywhere you want to. You can't say, well, you know, why don't we do this in West Virginia, let's say, which is a Trump state, or in Alabama. Then maybe we'll get what we want. You bring it close to where you think the crime may, or the offense may have taken place.
Right.
So Mueller has 2 grand juries going. He's got one in Northern Virginia, and he's got one in the District of Columbia. He could consolidate them. And let me make this point, that there's not a dime's worth of difference, or perhaps it is a dime's worth of difference, between Northern Virginia and the District of Columbia. The entire region, Maryland, the District of Columbia, and Virginia, Northern Virginia, all went for Hillary Clinton. So are we to believe that there's no grand jury, there are no jurors who can sit in any of these jurisdictions? That's not the way our system works, and I certainly don't think that the special counsel deserves to have his motives impugned that way, much less my constituents and the constituents of this region.
And what did you think of Professor Dershowitz's strenuously pressed claim that nothing he's saying is at all controversial? I think the issue that's worth questioning is why all of a sudden there are people who are questioning the entire grand jury system. It is certainly true, I think you and I both know, particularly in the context of criminal justice reform, that there have been questions that he referred to about whether these grand jurors just sign off on any indictment. But do you sense any sort of politically convenient obsession with that on behalf of Donald Trump at this moment?
I really think not, and I don't think most people focus on the grand jury. They know that anything that the prosecutor tells the grand jury is going to do, even Mr. Dershowitz said that. They may focus on the jury itself, but let me say there are many controversial figures who have been tried by jurors here. And I don't recall anyone saying, I don't want my jury to take place I don't want my trial to take place in the District of Columbia because there are too many black people there or because there are too many Democrats there. And you don't have a lot of choices. The prosecutor can't just go floating around the country for a friendly jurisdiction.
Right. And so finally, on that question of him bringing up the racial composition of Washington, your thoughts?
Well, I'm sure Alan would say that's not what he meant to do. And I know him so well that I don't think that's what he meant to do. But that's the clear impression he's left. This is a jurisdiction that is seen as more progressive than others. That has as much to do, I must inform you, with my white constituents as with my African American constituents. It's no longer a majority black jurisdiction. It's black and Hispanic and increasingly white. But he's going off of an old stereotype of the District of Columbia, which simply does not apply to a grand jury. And I don't think anyone in this region believes it would apply to a trial jury either.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.
Process of the grand jury system. Here's Newt Gingrich, for example, tweeting the grand jury would be biased because it's in D.C., which didn't vote for Trump. And while that's politicians, in a new op-ed today, Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz basically says that D.C. jurors could be tilted because of voter registration, saying the District of Columbia jury pool, overwhelmingly Democratic, and most prosecutors would prefer to have a trial in D.C. He argues they also might be more hospitable to Mueller because, quote, a predominantly white jury can be a different institution than a predominantly black jury. There's no one-to-one association. Predominantly black juries convict black defendants and acquit white defendants all the time, and predominantly white juries acquit black defendants and convict white defendants as well. But, Dershowitz writes, to say that race doesn't matter at all blinks reality, or at least that's what most experienced prosecutors and defense attorneys will tell you. In a moment, I will hear from the representative for Washington, but now I'm joined by Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz. Professor, isn't the important question here whether there's evidence of crimes, not all of these geographic issues that you're writing about?
Well, you need process, too. In order to determine whether there's enough evidence, you need a fair process. And all I said is that the prosecutor's decision to convene a second grand jury, he already had a grand jury in Virginia, had the effect, maybe not the intent, had the effect of giving him a tactical advantage. If there ever is going to be a trial, any prosecutor would rather try Trump associates in the District of Columbia than in Virginia, and any defense attorney would rather defend his client in Virginia than in the District of Columbia. That's just the reality. There isn't an experienced prosecutor, an experienced defense attorney who's honest who would deny that.
Well, Professor, when you say that, though, you make it sound as if you say that effect, but you make it sound as if that is part of some sort of bug in the system. If the individuals and the possible incidents or alleged crimes occurred in Washington, why wouldn't that be the natural place to move forward?
It's called fate.
Well, because we already have a grand jury in Virginia, and if these crimes occur, they occurred all over the world. The District of Columbia, which doesn't, really vote in presidential elections.
Okay, Mr. Professor, since you're apparently a dumbass, let me, the disabled guy on YouTube, explain it to you. If you have a grand jury convened in a state, it's for crimes committed within that federal district. If you have a federal grand jury convened in the District of Columbia, it's for crimes committed internationally.
It's certainly not the only place to have a trial. But if I were a prosecutor, I would certainly want to bring the case in the District of Columbia. And if I were a defense attorney, I would try to bring it elsewhere. That's not to say that you can't get a fair trial in the District of Columbia. Of course you can.
These people aren't morons. They're getting paid to hide things.
I remember the District of Columbia Bar. I practiced there. It's a very fair place.
The people interviewing them are the ones that are just learning as they go. But these old people, they get paid to give their opinions. They're not paid to give their opinions. They're paid to pretend they're giving their opinions.
And it doesn't mean you can't get a fair trial in Virginia, but any defense attorney will tell you And any prosecutor will tell you that demography matters, that where you try a case matters. And prosecutors will tell you sometimes, you better plead guilty because we have a terrific jury pool that won't be sympathetic to you. And that's an actual argument that prosecutors make.
Well, you bring up the jury pool. Let me go to that because obviously this is another piece of this debate. Number one, we're nowhere near an actual traditional jury pool because we're nowhere near indictments. I know, I understand, Professor. Let me get the question out. And then you get to answer. So we're nowhere near there. But with regard to the grand jury, you're bringing up the potential. You said demography, or in other comments you said race.
You're missing my point. You're deliberately distorting my point.
I'm not deliberately distorting your point, Professor. I'm trying to present a question to you, which I haven't even asked yet because of the accusations you're making. So please hold for a second. When I finish the question, you'll get to respond. My question to you is, if we both understand the jury system, if the ultimate jury for a potential indictment has not been selected yet, and the grand jury is secret, and nobody knows the race of either of those potential groups, how is race relevant? Your turn.
Well, first of all, the grand jury is irrelevant. The grand jury are 23 puppets seated on furniture who are told what to do by the grand puppeteer, who is the prosecutor. Grand jury will indict a ham sandwich if the prosecutor tells them to do so. So the only thing that's relevant is the petty jury pool. And the petty jury pool in the District of Columbia consists of many more Democrats than it would be in Virginia. That's why a prosecutor would want to try the case. And if he's going to want to try the case in front of a petty jury in Washington...
This guy ought to be disbarred for general defamation of governmental establishment and the legal system.
He has to now convene a grand jury in Washington because where you get the indictment is where you try.
He's supposed to be a Harvard law professor.
I'm not making a controversial point. You're trying to make it controversial. It is not controversial.
Professor, with all due respect, you have no idea why I'm trying to ask you a question or not. You're sidetracking by suggesting that my question is in pursuit of controversy. I'm asking you questions because you're an expert who is speaking out on these issues.
The question, what is the question? Do you actually think that a prosecutor doesn't have a better chance of getting a conviction of Trump associates in the District of Columbia than in Virginia? Is that your position?
I appreciate you asking me questions to handicap the future proceeding. My next question for you, though, is does any of this apply to the Ken Starr example?
I don't understand your question. What is it?
Well, Ken Starr obviously was pursuing a Democratic president, but in Washington.
Right. Of course, because he was pursuing in Washington, pursuing them in Virginia. There were grand juries, if I'm not mistaken, this is a long time ago. I don't understand what that has to do with anything. We're talking now about the possible effect of moving the grand jury from Virginia to the District of Columbia. I'm stating an absolutely uncontroversial, factual position that every experienced and honest lawyer will agree with. And that is, a prosecutor is better off bringing a case against Trump associates in a district that is overwhelmingly Democrat than in a district in a swing state. That is an uncontroversial point. You're trying to turn it into something else, and you're not succeeding. I'm sorry.
No, dumbass. You tried to turn it into something else. Then you didn't succeed. And then you had to backtrack because you got called on your bullshit.
I appreciate that you think you're clairvoyant about what I'm trying to do. These are straightforward questions. While I have you, the other question is about the potential federal laws implicated. I'm going to put some up on the screen. There's been a lot of debate over what the actual issue would be here. There's campaign laws, as you know. There's this Foreign Agents Registration Act, which is a felony but is rarely prosecuted. Corruption laws, the Logan Act, anti-money laundering, and then, of course, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which seems like a strong hook for the hacking.
You forgot terrorism and treason.
What do you think, from your expertise, are the key federal statutes that Mueller would be looking at?
You know, when I was a law professor, I used to give my student an exam. I would ask them to identify every conceivable statute under which a person could be indicted, and the students would give a great list, just like the list you put.
Domestic Securities Act 2002, Patriot Act 2003.
The second part of the question would be to exercise your judgment and to tell me what realistically you think they could be prosecuted under, and that's what distinguished the great students from the very good students. So, you know, when Joseph Stalin spoke to Lavrenti Beria, and Beria said to him, "Show me the man and I'll find you the crime," obviously you can find crimes by anybody who's engaged in complicated behavior.
I hope you fucking die of cardiac arrest right now. Did he really just compare people trying to preserve a democracy against a fucking tyrant who was installed by Russia to Stalin? He compared us to Stalin.
The applicant president, take the Logan Amendment. Of course there are violations of the Logan Amendment. Every day there are violations of the Logan Amendment. But it hasn't been prosecuted since 1803. You know, when President Reagan spoke to the Iranians and told them that he would like to keep the American hostages for an extra month so that he gets credit for their release, that was a violation of the Logan Amendment.
Interesting.
Obviously, nobody was prosecuted for that. When President Bush pardoned Caspar Weinberger, that closed the investigation, and the special prosecutor said that that was a cover-up, but nobody was prosecuted. The question is not what conceivable statutes could be touched, but what realistically there are precedents for prosecuting.
And with the time running out, my last question.
Okay, so you just contradicted your initial premise by saying that somebody who had violated the Logan Act needed to be pardoned. If there was no potential prosecution of the Logan Act because it hadn't been prosecuted in so long, why would Bush have pardoned the guy?
Question for you, sir, is have you provided any formal counsel to Donald Trump or his aides, or accepted any money, or would you consider providing counsel to them?
What an insulting question. I mean, have I accepted money?
Fuck this guy. Fuck this guy. Fuck that guy. Fucking useless lump of fucking skin.
I've got a message for certain students. Listen up closely, Snowflake. Yes, I'm talking to you. You, the social justice warrior who whines for trigger warnings and safe spaces. College isn't a babysitting service. It's time to grow up, Snowflake.
Okay, that's a taste of what you might have seen on your local...
Okay, here's the deal. How about I fight all these fucking people at once, and if I win, we inaugurate Hillary Clinton. I'm more than willing to.
News, at least if your local news station is owned by Sinclair Broadcasting, a relatively obscure media behemoth that, unbeknownst to most of its viewers,
more than willing,
insist its stations run these right-leaning commentaries and news packages. Now, Sinclair already owns more than 170 stations in 81 markets, covering an estimated 38% of U.S. households, and it wants to get bigger. A proposed $3.9 billion deal to buy Tribune Media would give Sinclair another 42 stations and the ability to reach 72% of U.S. households. Now, that level of dominance of the airwaves by a single company is supposed to be outside the bounds of the law. But this spring, President Trump's very pro-business FCC chairman, Republican Ajit Pai, invoked a controversial loophole in the law that would allow the deal to go through. And now, despite heated opposition, the deal is widely expected to be approved. Joining me now, MSNBC media analyst Gabe Sherman, special correspondent for Vanity Fair. But I want to start with just how people know whether they're watching a Sinclair station, which is that, I mean, how do they know?
The truth is they don't. I mean, Sinclair owns affiliates all over the country that are affiliated with the big networks. And so if you're watching your local ABC, NBC, or Fox affiliate in a market, you may have no idea that the corporate owner of this network has a political point of view. Sinclair does not brand its networks. We are, like Fox News would say, we are a conservative network, where Fox News, the viewers would know that. Sinclair does not market itself as the owner of these networks.
Yeah, and there's also the difference between local affiliates. I mean, when I grew up in New York, I would think of the network as the association, right? But outside of the major markets, like, you could be watching ABC in one market that's Sinclair owned, and NBC in another, or CBS in another, and they're just owned by Sinclair. That those numbers
Yeah.
Those letters don't really mean anything in terms of the news program.
Of course, and that's that is really why this is such a sea change possibly in the American media landscape, where you have a ideologically predisposed company that could push its message behind the curtain of objective news. I mean, this also we should just put in the context of a generational quest by Republicans to change the media landscape in their favor, going back to 1987 when Ronald Reagan's FCC repealed the Fairness Doctrine, which allows one point of view, which gave rise to talk radio. We are now seeing the rise potentially of right-wing broadcasting in television.
Sort of a talk radioization of local news.
Exactly.
And how controversial is the approval of the deal itself?
Well, you talk to people in the media industry, whether or not they're ideologically aligned with Sinclair, and they say this is very controversial. And in fact, Rupert Murdoch has now made overtures for Fox to acquire more local stations because they don't want a corporate competitor like Sinclair to be competing with them. There used to be laws in place that prevented the corporate overlords to buy up all the local markets because you did not want to have a homogenous point of view.
Right.
And now that these regulations are being repealed, there's nothing to say that NBC or Comcast could go and buy up local stations.
Yeah, we should be clear that part of that deregulation was the Telecommunications Act under President Bill Clinton, which allowed multiple outlets and markets to be owned. There's also, it seems like there's a little bit, at least, a faint whiff of quid pro quo here.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is, I've been thinking about this a lot today. This is in a certain way the definition of the swamp that Donald Trump wanted to change when he came to office. Sinclair is pushing pro-Trump segments. They hired one of his former campaign staffers, Boris Epstein, and now the Trump White House is passing regulation to favor their media ally. I mean, this is a sort of symbiotic relationship that should be anyone who is on the position of being against crony capitalism, they should not reward this behavior.
Yeah, we should note that the final decision has not been made. There are still public comments that you can make on the FCC's website one way or the other, and then there'll be responses.
Yeah.
So the decision is not yet made, although a lot of people are placing their bets it will be approved. Gabe Sherman, thank you. Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.
Congratulations, Joey. If you hear me, Joey got a new interview tomorrow. He's gonna be a race car driver or something. Lawrence. What you got, Lawrence?
And now for tonight's episode of Better Late Than Never, starring Republican Senator Jeff Flake. 6 years late.
Oh, look, it's Lawrence trying to be exciting.
I wish that we as a party would have stood up. For example, when the birtherism thing was going on, a lot of people did stand up, but not enough. Did you do it?
Lawrence is like the Mike Pence of MSNBC. Like, you know he's good at what he does. It's just boring.
That was particularly ugly.
I'm just curious, do you?
On that, I think I did.
Oh, no, you did not. You definitely did not do enough. The first time we can find Jeff Flake saying something negative about Donald Trump's lies about Barack Obama's birth was in June of last year.
In order for me to not just get tired looking at Lawrence O'Donnell's face, he needs to, like, goth it up or something. Like, he needs to, like, put on, like, black eyeliner and, like, little spider webs on his nose or something. Like, wear, like, a spiked shouldered leather jacket. Just dress in, like, a different costume every night or something. I don't know. Good reporter. Just something about this broadcast. It's literally like if I'm done absorbing all the other perspectives for the day, and I just want a little more stuff to think about while I fall asleep on the couch. Yeah.
Donald Trump had already locked up the Republican presidential nomination, and what Jeff Flake said then was not exactly a condemnation. He said, quote, "He has said he's an unapologetic birther. I don't know how anybody, seriously, any right-thinking person who can still believe that, Kennard, but I think he knows a lot of Republicans believe it, and he's willing to pander to them." If Republicans as a party had stood up against Donald Trump's lies about Barack Obama's birth 6 years ago, they could have stopped Trumpism in its tracks, but they didn't, and Jeff Flake didn't. Here's Donald Trump 6 years ago, April 7th, 2011.
He may not have been born in this country. And I'll tell you what, 3 weeks ago I thought he was born in this country. Right now I have some real doubts. I have people that actually have been studying it and they cannot believe what they're finding.
You have people now down there searching, in Hawaii?
Absolutely, and they cannot believe what they're finding.
I said Donald Trump was lying about that day 6 years ago. Jeff Flake said nothing. But yesterday, Jeff Flake said he thought he did enough in taking a stance against that lie. The first time Donald Trump opened his mouth about President Obama's birth, I said he was lying. Jeff Flake said nothing. The news media...
Well, you know how you could tell if Donald Trump is lying? His lips are moving.
Media as a whole never figured out how to handle Donald Trump's lying about President Obama's birth in interviews, and Donald Trump knew they would never figure out how to handle his lying because none of them were accustomed to dealing with an outright pathological liar talking about the President of the United States on television in interviews. And so every Trump interviewer failed whenever the subject of President Obama's birth came up. For 6 years, they failed, every one of them. And then last year, Donald Trump said President Obama was apparently born in the United States, and he didn't want to talk about it anymore. And the news media, for the most part, followed his orders and did not ask him about it anymore. And the final great attempt, and I do mean great attempt, to corner Donald Trump on this was admirably launched by Lester Holt in the first Trump versus Clinton presidential debate. Lester Holt went at it repeatedly. He went at it several times before eventually being forced to move on because of the debate format to other subjects. Lester Holt's final attempt to get Donald Trump to admit his lie about President Obama and admit that it was a lie with a racist appeal. In that final attempt, Donald Trump closed the book on the subject this way.
We're talking about racial healing in this segment. What do you say to Americans?
Well, it was very, I say nothing. I say nothing because I was able to get him to produce it. He should have produced it a long time before. I say nothing.
I say nothing. Well, Jeff Flake said nothing. He said nothing too. He said nothing that night about Donald Trump's racist lie. It would have been much more important for Jeff Flake to say something that night on debate night than it was yesterday, now that Donald Trump is the most unpopular first-year president in the history of polling. It takes far less political courage to say that now, but this is not the where were you when we needed you segment. It is the better late than never segment, and so this is one of those moments where gracious...
You know what it is about Lawrence? He gets a little too serious in his dramatism when he should be just kind of like a smartass about it. I'm guessing he doesn't have kids. Because if he would just have, like, the ironic, smartass tone of a parent when addressing these things, he might be a lot more entertaining. I mean, that's kind of like what, even though I don't even know if they have kids, that's what, like, Jon Stewart has that he doesn't.
Other feelings, and so it's time to say thank you, Jeff Flake, because...
And don't get me wrong, I bet you Lawrence O'Donnell would be a great guy to hang out with. I bet you he's a really cool guy. Just something about the presentation of this program, it's just hard to fucking pay attention to.
Better late than never. But we are never going to count Jeff Flake as part of America's early warning system that will try to save us from the worst poisons in our political system.
It's just a long time to make a point about something.
During rallies, when the chants lock her up, we shouldn't be the party for jailing your political opponents. And anybody at that rally, anybody at those rallies ought to stand up and say, that's inappropriate. We shouldn't be doing that.
Joining our better late than never discussion, Jonathan Capehart, an opinion writer for the Washington Post and an MSNBC contributor. Also with us, David Jolly.
Yawn.
Just days after learning investigators are following the Trump money trail, the Deputy Attorney General says the special counsel can look into any crimes he might uncover. How deep or far afield might this Russia investigation go? Plus, President's National Security Advisor says all options are on the table when it comes to North Korea, while the Hermit Kingdom is vowing a thousands-fold revenge against the United States after the United Nations passed the toughest sanctions yet against the rogue regime. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the lead. I'm Jake Tapper. We're going to start with the politics lead. For Trump supporters on Capitol Hill and in the administration, excited about the new discipline that retired Marine General and new Chief of Staff John Kelly might bring to this White House this morning, must have been something of a disappointment. The president turned from the outdoor storm raining upon the New Jersey golf resort where he's staying
Can y'all hear the news
to an indoor tweet storm of his own making. Was the subject of his frustration Congress for not having repealed and replaced Obamacare? Was it the tragedy of the opioid epidemic or unfair trade practices, his desire for changes to the tax code or immigration system, his desire for an infrastructure bill? Nope. The president again attacked the free press, specifically CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, the New York Times, and the Washington Post. He also went after A critic, Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal, who had just been on CNN discussing the FBI probe into possible collusion between the Trump team and the Russian government in the 2016 election. Now, after those tweets, the president turned to meetings, including an hour-long call with Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and his new Chief of Staff, Kelly. The topic, North Korea and the nuclear threat it poses to the world. From impulsive nonsense to gravely serious. CNN's Sarah Murray starts us off today with President Trump in New Jersey.
President Trump's big weekend win, securing unanimous United Nations sanctions against North Korea, quickly buried by a flurry of tweets today. First, Trump took on the New York Times, calling the paper totally inept for publishing a story suggesting some Republicans, including Vice President Mike Pence, have been quietly eyeing a run in 2020, just in case Trump doesn't make the ballot.
I couldn't be more grateful to serve as Vice President.
Pence is slated to travel to New Jersey to meet with the president this week, after issuing a terse statement Sunday, calling the New York Times story disgraceful and offensive, adding the allegations are categorically false.
What you're seeing is the vice president, in this case, pushing back strongly, emphatically, that he is not engaging in some sort of shadow operation.
Still unable to ignore the Russia investigation, the president also took aim at Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal. He's calling for bipartisan legislation to protect Special Counsel Robert Mueller from political interference.
If the president threatens to fire Bob Mueller, I think it's very important to protect and safeguard the independence and integrity of that investigation.
After watching that interview on CNN, Trump responding, interesting to watch Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut talking about hoax Russian collusion when he was a phony Vietnam con artist. Never in U.S. history has anyone lied under Richard Blumenthal. He told enlist in the Marine Reserve after multiple deferments. Trump, who was also eligible for the draft, never enlisted and received multiple deferments himself, including for a foot problem. Then Trump turned his Twitter attention to national polls showing his numbers sinking, tweeting, "The Trump base is far bigger and stronger than ever before, despite some phony fake news polling. Look at rallies in Pennsylvania, Iowa, Ohio." Trump also insisting his 17-day trip to his New Jersey golf club is not a vacation, tweeting, "Working hard from New Jersey while White House goes through long-planned renovation. Going to New York next week for more meetings."
My star doing a good job.
That after social media posts surfaced this weekend, showing him schmoozing with wedding guests at his Bedminster retreat while wearing golf clothes.
Now, President Trump is adamant that while he is here in New Jersey, he is going to be working hard, but the White House is offering only sparing details about how he's spending his days. We know he's got his daily intelligence briefing today, as well as that call on North Korea with some top aides. But aside from that, still unclear how Trump has spent his very soggy day in Bedminster. Jake?
All right, Sarah Murray, thank you so much. As the president slams those in Congress trying to protect the special counsel, Bob Mueller, from the same treatment the president gave fired FBI Director James Comey, there have been new developments on the scope of the investigation. CNN's Jessica Schneider explains what may be a new focus going forward.
Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein is defending the scope of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's ongoing Russia investigation.
The special counsel is subject to the rules and regulations of the Department of Justice, and we don't engage in fishing expeditions.
And says Mueller's team could expand its probe if appropriate.
If he finds evidence of a crime that's within the scope of what Director Mueller and I have agreed is the appropriate scope of this investigation, then he can. If it's something outside that scope, he needs to come to the acting Attorney General, at this time me, for permission to expand his investigation.
Rosenstein oversees the special counsel, whose investigation has widened to focus on possible financial crimes, as CNN has reported. Mueller's team is seizing on President Trump and his associates' financial ties to Russia, even though President Trump indicated in a New York Times interview any move to investigate his businesses would be crossing a red line.
Well, I was looking at your finances, your family's finances unrelated to Russia. Is that a red line?
I would say yes. Yeah, I would say yes. I don't make money from Russia.
President Trump has repeatedly tweeted calling Mueller's investigation a witch hunt and fake news. But Mueller is moving forward, using a grand jury sitting in Washington to issue subpoenas related to Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting in June 2016 with a Russian lawyer inside Trump Tower, according to a source. Former U.S. Attorney and current New Jersey Governor Chris Christie telling CNN's Jake Tapper on State of the Union that's to be expected.
This is a normal step taken by a careful prosecutor
who's doing a thorough investigation. And I think that's exactly what Bob Mueller is doing. You can't issue subpoenas without a grand jury. It's the grand jury that actually issues the subpoenas.
Christie adding that the June 2016 meeting was, quote, ill-advised.
This is not something that should have happened. Everybody in retrospect knows this is a bad idea.
But the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, told Jake the grand jury move is significant.
That wouldn't be taking place if there was really no evidence, no evidentiary basis to move forward.
Republican Senator Tom Tillis, meanwhile, cautioning the president against any move to fire the special counsel. Tillis is co-sponsoring a measure which would bar the president from directly firing any special counsel.
It would just be another piece of fodder or fodder for people who are trying to discredit what I consider to be one of the most important parts of the administration and the FBI within the Department of Justice.
And Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein would not comment on which individuals might be the subject of the special counsel's probe, but he insisted that the president has not directed the Justice Department to investigate particular people, despite the fact that President Trump has often pressed publicly for the DOJ to investigate Hillary Clinton. But Rosenstein did say, Jake, that's not the way they operate.
No, it isn't. Jessica Schneider, thanks so much. Appreciate it. North Korea.
Yeah, we got to investigate.
Wants the United States to, quote, pay dearly for the tough new sanctions. When we come back, what are any good options? Are there any good military options? What are they at the U.S. disposal? Spoiler alert, there aren't many.
I choose D, all of the above.
Welcome back to the lead. Breaking news in our world lead now. North Korea is vowing revenge against the United States after the UN Security Council, led by U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley, unanimously adopted the toughest sanctions yet against that country. Pyongyang is threatening the U.S. with, quote, thousands-fold retaliation. Let's bring in CNN's Barbara Starr, who joins us live from the Pentagon. And Barbara, when North Korea says things like it will make the U.S. pay dearly, what does that mean?
Well, the Pentagon has to assume, Jake, that it means North Korea would attack an attack the president says he would not allow to happen. North Korea now says
attack and attack.
There's no bigger mistake than the United States believing that its land is safe across the ocean.
Making clear that it won't give up its weapons program.
We affirmed that we'll never place our nuclear and ballistic missiles program on the negotiating table and won't budge an inch on strengthening nuclear armament.
The U.S. officially remains focused on diplomacy, but there are military options for dealing with North Korea.
Or are we preparing plans for a preventive war, right? A war that would prevent North Korea from threatening the United States with a nuclear weapon. And the president's been very clear about it. He said he's not going to tolerate North Korea being able to threaten the United States.
What I will tell you from the United States perspective is we're prepared to do whatever it takes to defend ourselves and to defend our allies.
With 2 recent intercontinental ballistic missile launches and a nuclear warhead development program, all options are on the table.
And that includes a military option. Now, would we like to resolve it short of what would be a very costly war in terms of the suffering of mainly the South Korean people?
Experts say the problem is not bombing North Korea's weapons program, it's what happens next.
You strike North Korea, they're going to strike back. And they have a devastating...
No, Trump's going to nuke North Korea, and then Russia's going to strike back.
Conventional arsenal built up right on the border that could lay waste to Seoul.
The former director of national intelligence says the military option has to be kept on the table, but it's not a good one.
Particularly a preemptory military operation against North Korea would be disastrous. Because I believe the North Koreans would unleash all that artillery and rocketry they have lined up along the DMZ, and they would, as they have vowed many times, turn Seoul into a, quote, a sea of fire.
And of course, one of the big questions, if you bomb North Korea's weapons program, how fast can they turn around and start rebuilding it? Jake?
All right, Barbara Starr, thanks so much. I'm joined now by Gordon Chang and David Sanger. Gentlemen, you both say that sanctions likely will not work, so now what? We'll get your answers when we come back from this quick break. Welcome back to the lead. More in our world lead. President Trump praised the United Nations Security Council's new sanctions on North Korea, and in fact just tweeted moments ago, quote, the fake news media will not talk about the importance of the United Nations Security Council's 15-0 vote in favor of sanctions on North Korea. We have been talking about it. This is our second block talking about it. But anyway, some experts are skeptical about these sanctions, saying that the new ones are unlikely to make Kim Jong-un blink. Let's talk about this with Gordon Chang, the author of Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World, and a columnist for the Daily Beast, and David Sanger, CNN national security analyst and national security correspondent for the New York Times. David, first of all, bottom line, how concerned should the American people be about there actually being a war with North Korea?
Well, I don't think there's going to be an all-out war in which the North Koreans shoot a nuclear weapon at Los Angeles or beyond. This regime is all about survival, and they know what the rest of that story would sound like and look like. I think there are significant risks here, though. One of them is that if the North was in a situation of collapse sometime in the next 2 years, the way we've seen with so many other regimes, although they've been immune to it so far, I think it's conceivable that you could see somebody launch a loose nuclear weapon or a loose missile, thinking that if the North was going to go away, they would take some other states out with it. I think there's some risk that a conventional conflict could result in escalation that became nuclear. And finally, Jake, I think you have to take these military options fairly seriously that President Trump is discussing. They may be intended just to try to scare the Chinese into doing more, but it's also very possible that President Trump, when he says we can't tolerate a nuclear North Korea, means he really is going to solve it, as he tweeted on January 2nd.
Sure. Take President Trump at his word. United Nations Ambassador Nikki Haley, Gordon, spoke with CNN's Ana Cabrera over the weekend about the latest sanctions. Take a listen.
This was a gut punch to North Korea. We did what we could in the UN, and that was basically speak with one voice. He is now on an island. North Korea now has to look at the rest of the world and see that they're all telling them to stop this reckless activity.
Gordon, she described this as a gut punch, these sanctions. Is it? Will the sanctions stop North Korea?
Yeah, I don't think they'll stop North Korea. I don't think they'll change the calculus that Kim Jong-un is working under. You know, they, for instance, cut 1/3 off of North Korea's export revenue, $1 billion off of $3 billion. But, you know, Nikki Haley in that same interview said, well, look, the North uses its export revenue to build its arsenal. So the question naturally is, why are they permitted to have $2 billion more? And also, that's North Korea's legal export income. Probably the North earns somewhere between $2 and $3 billion a year from Iran for their various forms of cooperations, missiles, nukes, God knows what else. And so we're not touching that as well. There's a whole bunch of things that we need to do. And until we stop this incremental approach, you know, ratcheting up sanctions just a little bit to see what will happen, well, the North Koreans, they just adjust. And I think what we have to do is go all in, all at once, stop all of their income. If we do that, then the North Koreans will understand not only that we're serious, but they also got to deal with the international community in good faith.
David, if the recent U.S. intel assessment is correct, North Korea will be able to launch a reliable, nuclear-capable ICBM by early next year. Is the U.S. running out of time to stop this?
Well, you know, I have some sympathy for President Trump on this, because every previous American president has looked at every incremental advance, including the time that you just discussed, and said, you know, bad as it is, it's not worth the risk of losing Seoul, as Barbara was reporting before, or the outbreak of a renewal of the Korean War. And so he happens to be president at the moment that they're finally reaching the point that every one of the previous 4 American presidents said the U.S. would never tolerate. And so I understand why it is that President Trump feels like he's got to make big pronouncements here. At the same time, his options aren't a whole lot better. I think they did some very deft diplomacy in getting this resolution through, getting it through quickly, and getting the Chinese and the Russians on board. But I agree with Gordon that until you do something that really makes Kim Jong-un wake up, which means cutting off the oil that's coming in from China, cutting off all other sources of revenue, I don't think he is fundamentally going to change course, because for him, the nuclear weapons program isn't a bargaining chip. It's an existential way of preserving his regime. And so this is not for him all about getting reintegrated with the West. And he looks at people like Gaddafi in Libya and says, you know, how did that work out for him?
Gordon, President Trump tried to persuade China to help with the North Korean crisis, first praising Chinese President Xi Jinping, then chastising China for not doing enough. You say no matter what Trump says, China's not going to help unless the U.S. changes its strategy.
Yes, the U.S. needs to impose some costs on China because that's the one thing that we have not done over 2 or 3 decades of failed diplomacy. And what President Trump started to do at the end of June was to signal to the Chinese that, yes, the United States had political will. So, for instance, we severed Bank of Dongdong, a small Chinese institution, from the global banking system for money laundering. But we also didn't go after Bank of China, one of China's so-called Big Four banks, so, for instance, he didn't announce the Section 301 trade action against North Korea on Friday, which everybody said that he would. I'm not thinking that President Trump is really at the point where he's willing to do what it takes to protect the American homeland.
All right, Gordon Chang and David Sanger, thank you so much. In our politics lead today, while the president is blasting fake news, he's out with his version of what is called real news. Which one, former ambassador to Russia said, looks more like state-run television? That story after this short break. We're back with our politics lead. President Trump is taking an extended stay at his resort in Bedminster, New Jersey. And just like every American taking a little time away from the office, he began his Monday morning by tweeting angrily about the news. Quote, hard to believe that with 24/7 hashtag fake news on CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, New York Times, and Washington Post, the Trump base is getting stronger. Of course, recent polling actually shows the president losing ground with his base. In addition to that dismal 33% approval rating overall, a Quinnipiac poll last week found that the president is underwater when it comes to white, non-college educated voters, a key part of his base. 43% approving, 50% disapproving. Now, a word or two about the president railing against hashtag fake news. Almost every single time he's used that term, the news has been accurate. It's just been news he doesn't like. You can start with his, I think, very first usage of the term, that CNN scoop, that intelligence chief, specifically then FBI director, briefed then President-elect Trump on the existence of that dossier which had made unsubstantiated claims about leverage Russians claim to have had on the president-elect. This was the president-elect's reaction to our report.
Don't be rude.
Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude. No, I'm not going to give you a question. I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Now, every word of that CNN report has been proven to be true, as verified eventually by James Comey and President Trump. Or you can take reports by CNN and the Washington Post and others of that tense conversation between President Trump and the Australian Prime Minister in January. On February 3rd, the president tweeted, "Thank you to Prime Minister of Australia for telling the truth about our very civil conversation that fake news media lied about." Very nice. But we now know from the leak last week of the transcript of the Washington Post that the president did not have a civil conversation with the Australian Prime Minister. He told him, quote, "I have had it. I've been making these calls all day, and this is the most unpleasant call all day. Putin was a pleasant call. This is ridiculous." So, all of this prompts the question, what does the Trump team think is real news using this Orwellian nomenclature? Well, we found out yesterday when President Trump's Facebook page unveiled a mock newscast from former CNN contributor and longtime Trump supporter Kayleigh McEnany. The conservative website redstate.com called this, quote, propaganda straight out of North Korea's playbook. Obama's former ambassador to Russia said it, quote, feels eerily like so many state-owned channels I've watched in other countries, but take a look and judge for yourselves.
Hey everybody, I'm Kayleigh McEnany. Thank you for joining us as we provide you the news of the week from Trump Tower here in New York. Overall, since the president took office, President Trump has created more than 1 million jobs.
It's interesting language. She claimed that President Trump himself has created more than 1 million jobs. Not business owners, not Congress, not Wall Street, not investors, not hardworking small businessmen and women. President Trump created those jobs. That's their idea of real news. The Trump Weekly News Roundup is being funded by President Trump's re-election campaign. Now, McEnany, who was also just named spokeswoman for the RNC, signed off her broadcast like this.
Thank you for joining us, everybody. I'm Kayleigh McEnany, and that is the real news.
Now, empirically, there's nothing journalistic about a political organization that exists to support a politician cheering on that politician. It's not real, and it's not news, and it's definitely not real news. Let's dive right in with my political panel. We have with us Robbie Mook, former campaign manager for Hillary Clinton, and Mary Catherine Ham, senior writer at The Federalist. The paperback edition of her book, End of Discussion, is out. It's a great read, and I recommend it highly. So, Mary Catherine, that's not real news.
No, that is not real news. Look, I do want to say the media makes mistakes, and the inability to grapple with that, I think, on the media's part sometimes furthers this rift between Trump voters and makes it easier for him to say everything is fake news, because some of it is wrong, and that should be admitted to and should deal with that. But look, obviously, this is a propaganda production. That's the whole point of it. It is a cruder version than what the Obama administration did, which was called West Wing Week, and it was a video production that was slicker. I'm not sure that I prefer a slicker version, or I prefer the really obvious propaganda. It's not controversial that this kind of production is part of a political organization, but it is different to refer to it as news. Although, like I said, West Wing Week was packaged like a news production, and sometimes they would do video and photo sprays that press was not allowed in on.
Absolutely. I thought West Wing Week was insidious at times when they wouldn't let us have the same access. But they didn't say we're the real news and they're the fake news, right?
Yeah, I think that, look, that's what's a little disturbing about this, is it has the look and the feel of a newscast. I don't feel like the materials that came out of President Obama's White House purported to be news. They didn't have that feel. I actually thought the only good part about this is that they actually have Trump's name in the background, so it's at least branded. I actually was concerned when I first heard about it before I saw it that it somehow had some fake news, network sign on there. But I think what the Trump people need to think about going forward is this is a good strategy for keeping their base. This is really good content that their supporters will share with each other on social media. That was an okay strategy for them in the last campaign. But an important thing to note is, Donald Trump didn't actually get more votes in Wisconsin than Hillary Clinton, or rather than Mitt Romney. He got the same. It's just that so many people were voting third party. The president needs to grow his base. He needs to grow. And what's really scary for them, you had that poll number that he's underwater now with non-college educated white voters. This appeal to his base is not going to solve that problem. He's got to start to expand.
Let's talk about, go on.
I was going to say, and his inability to grapple with the polls when they're not working well for him, or that when they're not coming out in his favor, also doesn't get him anywhere strategically, because if you're not recognizing people are turning their backs, then you're not going to try to win them over.
Let's talk about Vietnam for a second, because President Trump was feuding today with Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut, who, when he was running for Senate in 2010, misrepresented and made it sound as though he had actually been in Vietnam. He had not. He did apologize for it. The president called him a phony Vietnam con artist after Blumenthal appeared on CNN. But what's interesting is this whole subject of Vietnam, if you're President Trump, because President Trump, like Blumenthal, sought deferments, except unlike Blumenthal, never actually joined the military. Blumenthal did join the Marine Reserves. And there are these quotes about him joking about Vietnam in 93 and 97 on the Howard Stern show. If you're young and in this era and you have any guilt about not having gone to Vietnam, we have our own Vietnam. It's called the dating game, President Trump said once. And then another time, I've been so lucky in terms of that whole world. It's a dangerous world out there. It's like scary. It's like Vietnam. Stern says it's your personal Vietnam. It's my personal Vietnam. I feel like a great and very brave soldier. That's him talking about avoiding venereal diseases or sexually transmitted diseases. If you are Donald Trump, and Vietnam is not something like for John McCain or for so many others, that there's really nothing to criticize about your service, why even bring this up?
Because he just wants to hit Blumenthal. And frankly, I'm not mad at Trump being called on this, and I'm not mad at Blumenthal being called on it. If you tell a lie about your service that is designed to get you forward in your career, this is what annoys people about Trump. He's not used to getting called on it. Senator Warren's not used to getting called frequently on the fact that she faked some stuff about her heritage, and they get called on it. They don't like it. Trump has plenty of vulnerabilities. He's also president of the United States and became president with those vulnerabilities, so he's sort of in this weird way bulletproof in that position, and he doesn't care. He just goes after Blumenthal.
Yeah,
and I don't care if either one of them has to answer for this.
I have no issue with somebody who told a lie being called on that lie, especially when it is a lie like that is like a stolen valor type thing. You're claiming some service that people actually went through, and it was horrific and it's searing, and many of them never survived from it. You're actually appropriating it. But at least he joined the military.
This has always mystified me, I'll be honest. It just has always mystified me how the president is so inclined to affiliate himself with those who have served our country. He loved to surround himself with people who received medals in combat. And any objective analysis of his own record is that he dodged the draft. Now, a lot of people, there are a lot of different sides. I've never had to face that choice, so I'm not.
Nobody at this table has served in the military.
I'm not gonna judge anybody on that. But
I hope. I mean, I think this whole thing is silly. He's bullying a senator, and I don't even know how much time it's worth considering. But I don't understand how someone who stepped up and served our country can think that our president is an honorable man when he did not.
I want to talk about this New York Times story that said that aides to Pence have been reaching out to donors and other people in the Republican Party saying, if Trump is not on the ticket in 2020, and that's 3.5 years away, and who knows what's going to happen, Pence is there and he's ready. Not inherently an offensive thing, but boy, the Pence team has been pushing back on that. He issued a statement, calling it fake. Go ahead.
Well, because I think in the Trump White House, Pence's path to self-preservation and ambition is the same path. Like, you cannot be stealing Trump's spotlight and then also hope to be in the position that he perhaps would like to be in at some point. It's perfectly rational for him to make some sort of plans for that or have that thought in his mind, but he has to communicate that that's not part of it.
I think he doth protest too much on this one. He is doing everything that a sitting vice president who's planning to run for president would do, setting up that political action committee, the amount of political events he's been doing, how much he's traveling around. You have to imagine people are whispering in his ear, even joking with him all the time. You might be president, within the next 4 years. Look, we've been around this stuff. The detailed reporting, the specific conversations, the specific things that were said, you don't get that out of thin air. This is clearly happening. He is clearly planning to step in if needed. I don't imagine that he'd run against Trump in a primary, but I think he's getting ready to.
The protesting too much is part of what he must do in order to get there.
But don't you think Pence's aides would be committing malpractice if they weren't saying that to people?
Well, and there's also the part where Pence's aides are much more traditional GOP aides who know that world in a different way than the Trump folks do. So having those kind of connections is their job, and having those kind of conversations is their job, unlike, say, a Scaramucci, who was not plugged into that world and was not naturally having those conversations.
Yeah, but I mean, you need to be there to beat back just if something happens and President Trump decides not to run or whatever.
And he's caught flat-footed.
You don't want Nikki Haley, heading to South Carolina.
Well, the other reality is this is the same wing of the Trump administration, right? If you want someone who you can objectively go speak to, I would argue that some of Mike Pence's ideas are not that sane, but they are, you can deal with them in the normal manner. You can't do that with lawyers.
All right, Mary Catherine and Robbie, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it. Not even a pastor is immune from being detained for being in the U.S. illegally, even if he's trying to make it right. And now there are calls. Evangelicals are turning a blind eye to what's really going on under Trump's immigration policy. Stay with us. Welcome back. Our world lead takes us to Venezuela, where more unrest and violence is unfortunately erupting. This was the scene yesterday as the military clashed with anti-government activists who tried to attack a military base. 2 were killed and 8 detained by government forces. Now a manhunt is underway for 10 paramilitary men who managed to escape capture. President Maduro is calling it an attempted terrorist attack. CNN's Leila Santiago is on the ground in Caracas. She joins us now live. Leila, this is strong language for the Venezuelan government to call this an attempted terror attack. What are opposition groups saying today about the incident?
Well, opposition leaders aren't buying it. They're not buying the account of the government for what occurred at that military base, and they're actually calling for a full investigation of what occurred. Now, what we have seen as a result of this revolt is a strong show of force. And here's just one great example of that, Jake. Standing in front of hundreds of armed soldiers, standing in front of tanks, the defense minister took to not only social media but also the airwaves here in Venezuela and basically said, we're on the hunt. They have 8 people detained right now, but they're still looking for who they call is the mastermind behind this plot, a plot they call a terrorist attack that is backed by the right wing in Miami. So what do we know about this group? Well, on a video posted on social media showing some uniformed men claiming responsibility for this, they call this a legitimate rebellion, and they want to restore constitutional order, Jake.
And Leila, why are these anti-government forces specifically protesting the election outcome?
Right, so let's put this into context. This election was for more than 500 representatives of President Maduro's new constituent assembly. This is an assembly that would have a lot of power set to possibly extend the powers of President Maduro, and it is also filled with President Maduro's supporters. So there has been some controversy, not only in Venezuela, but also in the international community over the weekend, when the first things this Constituent Assembly did was oust the Attorney General, someone who was once a supporter, now a very vocal critic, has asked for investigations dealing with fraud as well as human rights abuses. So many in the opposition are concerned that they could be next when it comes to who they're targeting, Jake.
All right, Leila Santiago in Caracas, thank you so much. He's a pastor and an undocumented immigrant. Last week he went into with federal immigration officials to check in, and he never left. And now some evangelicals are saying others within their faith are turning a blind eye to this. That's next.
The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. Up next on CNN.
We're back with a national lead. Chicago is now the first city to sue the Trump administration over its new policy penalizing so-called sanctuary cities. The Justice Department says it will hold back federal grants from cities that do not comply with federal immigration enforcement requests. Chicago received $2.3 million of that funding last year to buy items such as SWAT equipment or police cruisers. With applications for new funding due next month, the Justice Department is now adding stipulations. Cities must give feds information on undocumented immigrants, let them access local detention centers, and give Homeland Security 48 hours notice before releasing a wanted undocumented immigrant. Chicago's Mayor Rahm Emanuel calls the new policy an unlawful, misguided action that undermines public safety.
The federal government cannot coerce a city to change its policy. That's what the court has already ruled on. The second piece, as you just noted, is we don't run a jail. We do lockups, and in 48 hours, if it's not a case, we let you go. You cannot ask us to hold people longer than 48 hours. So it's both a legal piece and a constitutional piece, and the city is on firm ground in that basis.
The Justice Department responded to Chicago's lawsuit, saying in a statement and referenced the city's homicide rate, saying, "It's especially tragic that the mayor is less concerned with that staggering figure than he is spending time and taxpayer money protecting criminal aliens and putting Chicago's law enforcement at greater risk," unquote. The Trump administration has stepped up raids on undocumented immigrants, and although the president has assured the public the raids are focused on bad hombres, his words, that is clearly not always the case. Today, one California father of 2 young children is praying a miracle will help his status. He admits he is in the country illegally, but had been doing everything he could to try to correct his situation. Despite his clean record and his day job as a church pastor, he is now sitting in a California detention center. CNN's Kyung La brought us this report.
Hi, I'm Kim. Inside this cramped room in an ICE detention center in the middle of the California desert, we're given 20 minutes to talk to Noe Carillas, undocumented immigrant, father, and pastor.
I love my family. I love this country. I love the church.
Carillas is the evangelical pastor for this Los Angeles church. Last week, he went to his ICE check-in and never came out. The Guatemalan native crossed illegally in the 1990s and was working to fix his immigration status. He has no other criminal record. So for the past 3 years, ICE allowed Carillas to stay.
I'm a man of God. I'm a man of faith. I'm a pastor. I never commit any crime in this country.
What do you say to the people who say that you came here illegally?
I have 2 kids. I'm working in this country. I support the economy of this country, and I pay in my taxes.
So if they're going to do this to you, what does this say about the other 11 million undocumented people in this country?
That's a signal they want to remove every people do good things and right things in the United States of America.
The pastor's arrest comes as part of the Trump administration's policy shift on immigration. ICE guidelines now state officers will take enforcement action against all removable aliens. Arrests of undocumented immigrants with no other criminal convictions are up 50% as compared to last year. At the pastor's home, his 5- and 6-year-old children struggle to understand that government policy in their life.
He's been here long enough and he's done nothing wrong. We should get the chance, opportunity to make things right.
To the president, she pleads.
He has grandchildren. And they heard the same as mine. Please, to have mercy.
This is not political, this is about my faith. And it's about family.
These ministers leading churches across California say white evangelicals are turning a blind eye when it comes to immigration, even as their faith sees a surge in Latinos. 80% of white evangelicals voted for Trump.
Today you have a choice, and we need you to choose to stand with us.
Are white evangelicals doing enough?
No, it's not enough. It's not enough until this stops.
Pain in my ass. Special envoy McGurk. Where the Burke is a McGurk.
Thank you so much for being here on this Friday. We have our special presidential envoy to the Global Coalition to defeat ISIS, Brett McGurk, who's here with us. I know you heard from Brett just a couple weeks ago at the end of the ISIS coalition meeting here in Washington. And so Brett wanted to come in today to provide you all with an update as to where things stand in the campaign. So without further ado, Brett's here with that.
Okay, thanks everybody for coming. I thought what I'd do today, you heard from the Secretary for a kind of trip around the world, 6 months in here, since he arrived, about everything going on in the world and activity here at the State Department. And what I thought I'd do is drill in a little bit more on what he discussed about the very important, one of our key priorities here at the Department, about the campaign against ISIS. So I want to focus on the overall campaign. It's a global campaign. But dive in a little bit to the so-called caliphate in Iraq and Syria and kind of bring you into what we're doing every day and how it's working interagency throughout our government and particularly our diplomats.
Boring.
To retweet a.
Whoa. Okay, that one doesn't have a volume problem.
We don't have that reporting. It's also notable that this report contained classified information to unnamed sources. Of course, the president has railed against unnamed sources. Just hours later, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley was asked about that report on Fox that the president retweeted. Here's what she said.
I can't talk about anything that's classified, and if that's in the newspaper, that's a shame. It's incredibly dangerous when things get out into the press like that. You're not only just getting a scoop on something, you're playing with people's lives.
All right, and as I said, CNN has not confirmed that Fox reporting. Barbara Starr is with us at the Pentagon. Barbara, Nikki Haley said incredibly dangerous and a shame this is out in the media, but the president put it out there more.
Well, you know, he's the commander-in-chief. He gets to tweet what he wants. But let me take just a little different take on all of this and discuss some of the substance at hand here. This is all about something called an anti-ship cruise missile. I don't want to geek out on everybody, but as the threat from North Korea grows, it's really important to understand what the president and what Fox News is talking about. An anti-ship cruise missile is very different than the ballistic intercontinental missiles that pose a direct threat to the United States, South Korea, and Japan. These are missiles that go on ships and basically defend coastlines or maybe attack shipping at sea. The North Koreans typically, they haven't put these on those ships in a while. It's important to note. But shipping stays out of North Korean waters, Western shipping at least, and there's a very good ability to track any shipping, military shipping by the North Koreans, any of their military vessels that would have these missiles on board. So this is something quite different. This is not part of the larger debate about the ballistic missile threat, which are long distance, causing potentially tens of thousands, if not millions of casualties. This is very short range stuff, very close to North Korean shores in their waters. Important for the South Koreans because they're always looking for some North Korean provocation at sea. But again, different. So it'd be really interesting to know when the president retweeted this, what he really had in mind about this. Was it something that perhaps he thought was not serious enough, seriously classified enough, that he could go out there and retweet it? And is there some mixing up of the threat here between the shorter range missiles and the ballistic missiles, which really is the focus of the threat right now?
It would be helpful to know, indeed. Barbara Starr at the Pentagon, thank you for all of that. Let's bring in Democratic Congressman of California, Ted Lieu. He's a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, also has served this country. Thank you for being here. Given your position, the committee you sit on, and given your service in the armed forces, what is your take on what Barbara just reported, the fact that you have these unnamed sources in this Fox News report that Nikki Haley called a shame to be out there and dangerous, and the president retweeted?
Thank you, Poppy, for your question. It is alarming the casualness with which President Trump shares classified information. Earlier this year, he gave classified information to the Russians, and now he retweets an article with classified information. I have a security clearance, and we're taught that just because something is in the press doesn't make that information no longer classified, and you're not allowed to share it. So the president should not be tweeting classified information just because he's the president.
All right, so you proposed legislation back in January, but you actually tweeted about it just a few days ago, and it is certainly germane to this conversation, so I'd like you to weigh in on it. You would like, through your legislation, to try to prevent the president from having the ability of first use of nuclear weapons without congressional approval. Now, this is something, an authority that was given to the president, to any sitting president, back in 1946. Why do you believe, A, the president shouldn't have that power, and B, that Congress would do a better job with that power?
Senator Markey and I introduced this legislation because our view is the current nuclear launch approval process is unconstitutional. Right now, one person can launch thousands of nuclear weapons, and that's the president. No one can stop him. Under the law, the Secretary of Defense has to follow his order. There's no judicial oversight, no congressional oversight, and that would be a declaration of war, launching lots of nuclear weapons that can kill hundreds of millions of people. And our view is only Congress can declare war. The legislation says you need to first get the approval of Congress before you do a first use of nuclear weapons.
But Congressman, you didn't have any problem with this legislation prior to the presidency of President Trump. I mean, you introduced it 4 days after his inauguration.
Yes, we also introduced it last year when we all believed that Hillary Clinton was going to be the next president. Our view is that this is a structural fix regardless of who happens to be president, because we can't have the control of nuclear weapons be decided by just one person.
Okay, important point. I was wrong on that. I did not know that. Moving on to some of this polling. I know you've seen it this morning, right? And the headlines are not good for this White House. The trust deficit, it's etc. Even his base, falling in terms of the strongest, most ardent supporters for the president. However, there is an important note in there that is good for this White House, and that is that 53% of Americans right now think things in the United States, in the country, are going well. 53%. That is compared to 45% who think things are not going well. President deserves some credit for that.
So the CNN report is quite stunning. It does show that we have a president with a significant credibility crisis that can't get a lot of things done with Congress. But I don't want to see this presidency fail. And one of the things about the CNN report is even though the majority of Americans think that the country is doing okay, the middle class
well, they
is not
say
doing
well.
okay.
They say well.
Right, but the middle class is not doing so well. And so one of the ways for the president to improve his poll numbers is to work with Democrats. I've introduced legislation on infrastructure that's going to create better jobs, wages, and skills. Senate Democrats have done the same, and I urge the president to come work with us or come up with his own plan. And if he works on a bipartisan basis, I think he can no longer have the failures that he did the first 6 months.
So your party would have more success in this and having their voices heard more, certainly if you held a majority of even the House. And there's a really fascinating article out by our Chris Eliza this morning, who cites research from David Wasserman of 538 blog. And here's his analysis of the 2018 election heading into the midterms. Even with all of the negative numbers in this polling for this president right now, here's what he writes. Even if Democrats were to win every single 2018 House and Senate race for seats representing places that Hillary Clinton won or that Trump won by less than 3 percentage points, they could still fall short of the House majority and lose 5 Senate seats. Does that make you nervous?
Absolutely, and that's why, as a vice chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, we're working hard to make sure we have the best candidates going to next November. But keep in mind, we have to flip 24 seats in the House. 23 of them, Hillary Clinton did win those districts. An additional 9, Barack Obama won twice. So we are in a good position, but we do have to keep working and making sure that the American people understand that the Democrats are fighting for the middle class.
I got 15 seconds. Is this leadership, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, the leadership to get you there?
Absolutely. They're going to get us there.
Thank you very much, Congressman Ted Lieu. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The U.S. Marines have identified 3 of their own who died after their aircraft crashed off the coast of Australia. You see them right here. We're getting their names and their images for the first time. You've got First Lieutenant Benjamin Cross, Corporal Nathan Ordway, and Private First Class Ruben Velasco. They were declared dead after an extensive search and rescue mission failed to find their remains. The Osprey aircraft went down Saturday during a joint training exercise with Australian forces. I should note all of these men under the age of 30. We'll be right back. It is one of President Trump's favorite targets, the media, whether he's calling it failing or phony. The president often lashes out at press coverage he thinks is unfair or he thinks ignores his achievements. And now his inner circle is taking matters into its own hands. Something has launched, dubbed Trump TV. You may have seen it on Facebook. It's a series of videos running on the president's personal Facebook page. You recognize her. That is newly minted RNC spokesperson and former CNN contributor Kayleigh McEnany. She's the host of the program. But the woman in charge is Lara Trump, the president's daughter-in-law and the wife of his son, Eric.
Behind the military.
Lara Trump here. I bet you haven't heard about all the accomplishments the president had this week because there's so much fake news out there. We wanted to give you a glimpse into his week. The stock market is up, the economy is booming, ladies and gentlemen, and jobs. There have been almost 800,000 new jobs created in this country since Donald Trump took office in January.
Joining me now, CNN senior media correspondent Brian Stelter. Good to have you here. Look, the beauty of
talking about all the real bad news affecting his administration with a rosier picture online.
He's also saying things that are just patently false about what the media is covering and what it is not covering. Case in point, the UN sanctions on North Korea. Yeah. Watch this.
Right.
This was a gut punch to North Korea today. And this was a strong day for the United States. It was a strong day for the international community. It was not a good day for North Korea.
Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says a unanimous UN vote slapping North Korea with the strongest sanctions yet
shows the world is united against the reclusive regime's nuclear ambitions.
Now, the president also saying he is happy and impressed with the latest round of UN sanctions against North Korea.
The United Nations Security Council over the weekend unanimously, 15-0, passed a resolution imposing new sanctions against North Korea.
North Korea is vowing revenge against the United States after the UN Security Council, led by U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley, unanimously adopted the toughest sanctions yet against that country.
Note that clip by Jake yesterday was actually airing at the moment the president tweeted this. The fake news media will not talk about the importance of the UN Security Council's 15-0 vote in favor of sanctions on North Korea. That is just not true.
There are times this behavior seems almost pathological. The pattern of falsehoods that come from the president's Twitter feed, and it affects his aides as well, and it affects his media outlets like Sean Hannity, because then they have to back up the BS that he's posting on Twitter. He also said the New York Times is losing a lot of money on Twitter last night. The New York Times responded by saying, we're profitable and our stock is up 50% right now. I was talking to Glenn Kessler about this morning. He's the Washington Post fact checker, the guy that does the Pinocchios.
Right.
And he said, for most of Donald Trump's life, he was able to get away with falsehoods. In his business world, there were ways to do it. When you're president on a world stage, it's much more obvious when you're spreading misinformation.
There's something very significant, and that is a move that one of the biggest broadcasting companies in this country, Sinclair Broadcasting, has made. They just bought Tribune, another huge media company. They're going to have even more reach, especially in some of these big swing states like Ohio. They have done things like mandating airtime for huge Trump surrogates and supporters.
Yeah, for Boris Epstein. I remember him during the campaign. Now he appears frequently on Sinclair stations with pro-Trump commentaries. This is notable because this deal, it's seen some opposition from a lot of Sinclair's competitors, but it's likely to go through. Sinclair is a conservative leading broadcaster at stations all across the country. And Boris's commentaries, they're an example of that counter-narrative I was talking about, presenting pro-Trump almost no matter what messaging. I think all of this is about...
but it's mandated. That's the difference. 13 and a half minutes a week, 9 segments are mandated on their station.
Right, that the anchors have to toss to these pro-Trump commentators
with no
matter
pushback
what.
afterwards.
I think this is all about shoring up the base. Whether you're the head of Sinclair or whether you're an aide to the president, it's about trying to shore up the base for that looming confrontation with Robert Mueller.
And it might be effective, but the American public has to know this is happening. This is what you're presented with. Be aware of where these things are coming from, right?
That's right. You got to be able to know the source. It's almost like a nutritional label for your news when you're consuming it.
I'm just picturing that.
That'd be nice.
Give this show a good nutritional label, okay? Ryan Salter, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Offensive and not okay. The head of Google, the CEO, quits vacation, comes back to deal with this incredibly controversial memo written by a male engineer saying women not biologically fit for those tech roles. Next.
The CNN original series, The 90s, Sundays at 9.
The president taking to Twitter this morning saying he is meeting with Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price today at 3 o'clock on the opioid crisis. That is good news. This is getting more attention. This comes as we continue our special report, Hook, America's Addicts. We take a close look also at the victims that you do not always see in this crisis, the children. Next hour, you're going to see an incredible reunion here. A father whose heroin addiction ripped him away from all of his children. And we are there when he is reunited with his 12-year-old son for the first time in a decade.
Man, it's been a long time. 10 years. 10 years. Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's up next hour. Meantime, a story all over the headlines this morning, offensive and harmful. That is how the CEO of Google is describing an anti-diversity memo written by one of Google's male employees. Now the engineer behind the manifesto, which claims women are less suited for tech jobs than men. Why? Because they're women. Biologically, they can't do it. Well, that engineer tells the Wall Street Journal he has been fired. CNN senior technology correspondent Lori Siegel is here. Lori, you've seen the memo. You've got a lot of reporting on this. The CEO comes back from vacation.
Yeah, big deal. He sent a memo last night to all Google employees saying that this was harmful, and he said, I'm coming back from conduct. Now, speaking to sources inside Google, you can read between the lines. They'll tell you if you're in violation of the code of conduct. Generally, that means you're fired. So it doesn't surprise me that he's confirmed with the Wall Street Journal that that he was fired.
Now, some of the women that worked around him, and I would assume some of the men too, but said that they feel uncomfortable working around him, this male engineer, after they knew that he wrote this memo. That's an issue, obviously. So is just the broader context here of what's been going on in Silicon Valley.
Absolutely. And in the memo, he also said he didn't want women to feel, worried that they would be perceived as neurotic if they speak up at a meeting, or they needed to be agreeable. We've heard this before, Poppy.
Yes.
You look at
not here, though. I have to say,
in general, we hear this. And I want to throw up some stats before we go, because they're important to look at. The women at Google, overall, 31% women at Google, only a quarter of those leadership positions filled by women. And tech jobs, and this is noteworthy, only 20% women. And then you look at ethnicity at Google, 53% white, 39% Asian. So, this is a problem at Google. This is a problem at so many different tech companies. This is just a story that's putting it out there and shedding light on it.
And they're not alone in some of these numbers. They're working really hard to get them up, but until you have some sort of parity, it's really hard to get an equilibrium
there. Conversations like this always important.
Well, gee. I had said something about Google and YouTube having some sort of ideological tie, seeming to be behind or coalescing with the conspiracy to prevent Hillary Clinton from becoming president, and thereby, defending the country and whatnot. So, I think I've collected more than enough circumstantial evidence via Russian hackers and trolls that were allowed to comment on my videos that did not have comments enabled, by their continual suppression of this channel, including preventing views and deleting views. And now we have motive, right? Evidence of a general misogynistic culture within the ranks of Google. What did I say, 2 years ago or so, that all this would be about? How I would use reality now to prove how you have no idea about Mary Magdalene back then. Okay? I think it's gone rather swimmingly. In addition to the whole, I've had enough of people walking around posing as Christians that just aren't, called Republicans. And, I've been a broken record long enough. I don't need to keep repeating myself on all the other things that I've repeated. They've all came true. But, front spoiler. Anyway. I'm going to go ahead and do something. I forgot what it was now. But I'm going to remember it. Then I'm going to do it. So, y'all have a good day. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for hanging out. I hope the fishies were cute. And I'll probably be broadcasting a little more often. I can't promise any type of direct frequency yet, or regular. Can't promise that I'm going to be very regular. Because I eat mostly junk food. Yeah. Click the like button, make sure you're subscribed, and click the dingy little bell thing